Joining us is James Dreymala, who is the father of one of the victims of David Owen Brooks. Mr. Dreymala, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us here on Houston's Morning News.
No problem.
You know, as I researched this story and I made myself familiar with what took place, I can't even imagine, sir. I am the father of a 7-year-old boy, and it made my heart just sink to try and put myself into the place of someone that has a child missing, and then to find out that it's possible, and thank God it didn't happen, that the person that may have been responsible, or at least was involved in the death, could have gotten out on parole. And thank God that didn't happen.
Yes, I agree. Two comments I want to make in reference to this. Number one, I understand that the judicial system is designed to give inmates a possibility for parole for those who are incarcerated for a short period of time for minor infractions on society, and that I appreciate. But a situation like this, where these two animals that are still alive would ever be considered for parole, is just unfathomable. Number two, my son was not he was lumped in with a lot of different runaways, and he definitely was not a runaway. Not that all of those were, but I want to clear that up. He was certainly not a runaway. He was indeed kidnapped, taken off the street, and became a victim, not of his own accord. So those two things I want to make absolutely perfectly clear, that he was not a runaway, had a perfectly fine home, and he was just out for an evening ride on his bicycle. He was not a runaway.
James, we were talking this morning about how terrorized the entire Heights neighborhood was for so long. 30-plus years later, how do you cope?
Well, we were not in the Heights, and he was probably the first victim in the Pasadena area. And the reason he was a victim in this area is they ran out of space and ran out of friends in the Heights area, and they had moved their mode of operation into the Pasadena area.
You know, it's interesting. Dean Allen Corll, who seemed to be the mastermind of all these serial killings, was the man that was shot finally by Henley, and it's just an unbelievable series of events that took place to up when he was killed, and how this whole thing unfurled. If you would hang on for me, Jim, I want to ask you, as a father, what other parents can do to maybe keep their kids safer today. What you may have learned, and you could share with us this morning. So if that's okay with you, hang on for us, because that's information we could all use.
Your morning news continues now on KTRH.
KTRH News Time is 8:53. James Dreymala is the father of one of the victims of David Owen Brooks and the two other animals that murdered over 25 young men in Houston. 18 times Brooks has been denied parole. He was denied parole again over the weekend. There was some concern for a brief moment that maybe it would be considered. It was not, thank God. And Jim, I appreciate your time here this morning. I am sure not a day goes by when you don't think of your son. And for Lois and I, we are both parents of sons, and just for any parent, son or daughter, what do we need to do, in your estimation, to keep our kids safer today?
Well, first of all, you got to let kids be kids. Keep an eye on, know where they're at, but don't turn them into prisoners.
And that's hard to do sometimes, Jim.
Yep.
That's really hard to do. I mean, when we look at this story and we know what happened, it is very hard to do.
Yep.
It's hard for me, because I don't let my son go out. If he's riding his bike, I got to be standing there. I got to watch everywhere he goes.
Well, again, don't let them be prisoners. Don't turn them into prisoners. Let them be kids. But be vigilant. Know where they're at all times. Know who they're with. And in today's society, with cell phones like they are, they can keep in touch with their parents, and you can keep in touch with them on a minute-to-minute basis if you need to.
Right.
But don't lump them in with everybody else saying, "Oh, they'll be fine," because they may not be fine. You may think you know where they're at, but do you really?
Jim, how do you cope every day?
Well, time does does heal. In this situation, time simply dims the past. It doesn't heal. You'll never get over that.
Jim, you're in our thoughts and prayers, my friend, as are the parents and families of all the other victims. And
thank you.
We will never forget, and we will be vigilant to make sure these animals stay in jail.
Well, I think one of the things that we can do for these two animals is make sure that the set off is every 5 years. Don't make the families go through this every 3 years. We fought and fought and fought to get it changed from 1 to 2 years all the way to 3 years. And it's up to the parole board to make this decision to set off their next parole hearing for 5 years. Henley's coming up in October of next year, and we'll be right there battling to have his set off for 5 years and his parole denied. It's a shame that, the victims and the victims' parents and relatives have to go through this as often as we do.
It is indeed. It is indeed.
Should not be that way.
Jim, I thank you for your time, my friend. God bless you and your family. Thanks for taking the time for joining us here this morning.
Thank you for letting our voices be heard.
You bet.